the Expert. I'm Sue Pahl, the CEO of Shift Coaching and the creator of the Shift Corporate Coach Program. Today, I have with me Margaret Moore. Margaret is our guest, and she's going to be talking to us about systems of leadership, well-being, and coaching, and how they all fit together. Margaret is the CEO and founder of Well Coaches. She is also the co-founder and chair of the Institute of Coaching, which is part of the Harvard community. And to top it all off, Margaret is not only a biologist, she also has an MBA and really is interested in the science behind coaching. And today, that's what we're going to be talking about. So Margaret, do you want to talk to us a little bit about that multiplicity of roles that you have here?
Yeah, thank you, Sue. And it's lovely to be with you. And I think I've told you that my hometown is near Toronto as well. So I'm feeling the being back home a little bit. And of course, I am a dual citizen now here in the US. So I straddle both countries. So I guess in terms of like how things work and how I think about things work, I am more a biologist than I am a psychologist. And as a biologist, biology is a system, a very complex, amazingly well-engineered, over evolution system. And so I think about the mind, and I think about human thriving and leadership and coaching as expressions of that system, all coming from common elements. Right. And I spent several years in training in what's called internal family systems, with understanding that the mind, the personality, the psyche, whatever it is that's going on out there or around us, is multiple, and like a compound, like a molecule with multiple elements working together. And I do think there's sort of a common set of 9 elements that maps to a bunch of personality models, and they mix and match to create our experience as humans, create our personality, create our roles as parents, as leaders, as coaches. Yeah, so I think there's this system underneath it all that manifests in all of the roles we have.
Absolutely. Well, do you remember back in the day when people used to say, I'm at work now, so I've got to put my work hat on. Well, that no longer seems to happen anymore. We really have to bring our whole selves to work. It doesn't seem good enough anymore to say, well, that's my personal self and this is my business self. Really, this integration has come into the fold.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that the whole move towards inclusion.
Yes.
So for a woman, I started off, as a woman in business in a big chemical company where I was not, and so we didn't have emotions.
Of course not. No, you leave those at home.
Right, exactly. And we didn't. So I think, yes, I think in our lifetimes, and I'm grateful for the millennials pushing us all in that direction to be really our whole selves all the time.
Oh, absolutely. And there has been a significant change just over this past, I guess, year and a half. It feels like we've even amplified the need for us to bring our whole selves to work, given what we've just all had to go through globally.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we can't get away from our whole selves anymore.
Right.
We had so much time living with our whole selves, and that's not an easy thing, right? The internal world is easy to ignore when you're running around, flying around, busy, multitasking, and now it's all there with you a lot of the time. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I know, Margaret, that the theory of constructed emotion, which is work that Lisa Feldman Barrett has brought to the table. And I know you've written, a book and many articles on this. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that theory and how you think it plays out today in the world?
Yeah, and it's actually extremely important, for leaders and for coaches. So, back to having no emotions, 30 years ago, it's the mid-90s when Mayer and Salovey, who were the 2 guys who actually created the framework of emotional intelligence, but they're not that well known because Dan Goleman did the work of making it into a framework, a popular framework, and a book. And so in the mid-90s, now it became of interest to be intelligent about one's emotions, that emotions were important. But before Lisa Barrett, like, so there's a textbook I read a few years ago. I didn't read the whole thing on, theories of emotions.
Right.
And, this big, and there were a lot of theories and they were all different.
Hmm.
So we really didn't understand where they come from, why we have them.
Yeah.
We just have them and we wish they'd go away, because they get in the way, especially if you're trying to be calm and objective and, and do a good job. So what Lisa has, taught us, she's done a lot of the work, but she's really bringing the whole field together, is that the brain does two things. Continually, automatically, that we have no control over. So one is that the brain is not intentionally reading reality and sensing reality. It is taking in reality and turning it into predictions. So it tells you what to do. Going to tell you what's going to happen next. What do you need to do? Or how do you need to react? Or, how do you get prepared? And the way your brain tells you about its predictions of what's going to happen to you is via your emotions. Right. So your emotions are the messenger between your, internal systems doing all this predicting. And now, because we have such busy lives, it's across a whole bunch of domains, almost simultaneously, right? So, and then it's producing emotions. And of course, now there's a lot of emotions, because there's the emotions related to your family, and the emotions related to this project, and the emotions related to, whatever's on your mind right now, right? There's a lot going on. Yes. So now we have a lot of emotions going on, and like, it's a bit of a mess, right? How do you make sense of that? And similarly, your brain is making categories, because the world is complex and it's trying to make things simple. Right. And that turns into your identity at an early age. And then that turns into bias and all kinds of messy things. So basically, all this reality you think you have, categories and emotions, are produced by the brain and based on past data.
Right.
Not based on present reality. So it's like you're wearing virtual reality glasses. Right. Because your emotions and your thoughts, are based on your brain's predictions or categories. Right. So you're not in touch with reality, because you're seeing it through this virtual reality that your brain is producing. And so what that means is, if you want to actually touch reality, this is where mindfulness is so powerful. You have to set it aside.
Right.
You have to see it as a set of processes that are happening, that are actually separate from your core self.
Right.
Your core of, and so when you set aside the mental activity, the emotional activity, you then can use your senses, which are down and back in your brain, right, to in fact experience reality. And when you experience reality, you're not thinking, feeling. Your brain is not doing its activity. You're actually sensing it. You're feeling it, sensing it, touching it. And so in coaching, in coaching school, you probably remember we were supposed to experience our clients' emotions and feedback. I'm sensing you're feeling X. Right. But in fact, Lisa's model suggests that that's a bad thing to do, because we're going to interfere with their emotions. We want to ask them, what are you feeling right now? Right. We're experiencing. The second thing to know is that, okay, so it's trying to communicate, the brain's trying to communicate to you, and it didn't come with an instruction manual, right? It's only taken us 50,000 years to even begin to understand what's going on. So, but then the emotions have a purpose. They have a purpose. They're there to tell you a lot of things. And you want to, so I'm going to have a sip of water.
Sure, of course.
I'm getting too excited here.
Yeah.
So emotions are not, they're data.
Yeah.
They're telling you something. And what they're telling you is to either act on, like, you're tired, get a rest, you're hungry, get a bite of food, or they're inviting you to learn. And so if you know the model of acceptance and commitment therapy, where you're taught, and Susan David has a book around the sort of practical application of that, called Emotional Agility. Right. If you move toward your emotions and you welcome them and you get to know them and you ask them, what do you need? What do I need? What's this part of telling me that I need? What's there to learn? And then I have a mindfulness hack where you can actually, what I call declipse the emotion and get what's called integration, which is that you get the emotion is trying to point you towards the integration. So integration. So this is Dan Siegel's work. If you want to calm your emotions, okay, you're aroused, you're angry. We have that idea of sleeping on it, right? If I sleep on it, I'll be able to be more objective. So the reason for that is because during sleep, the brain integrates the emotion. It turns it into calm, wisdom, equanimity.
Right.
But it's not very reliable. Like it happens, but you never know when it's going to happen. So you can be meditating on a mountaintop, wishing that you would let go of your divorced mate or your last job or the fight you had with your colleague. You're wishing it would go away and you could just kind of come out of it stronger, wiser. But that's where we're going. And so emotions are basically your path to integration. And with integration, you're more conscious and your ego sort of starts to calm down and you start to be in the world more creative, more effective, better leader, everything else. So so emotions are taking you somewhere.
Right. And it gives you're at a point of choice, I suppose, then when you can actually, when you're integrated like that, you actually can be a little bit more intentional about what you do and how you do things.
Yes, because your emotions are not actually clouding your perception.
Right.
So every moment is simply offering potential.
Right.
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 It's
Absolutely.
just potential.
Yep.
And as soon as you bring all your other brain's activity into it, you miss the potential because your brain is predicting, not reading reality.
Absolutely.
So you're missing the potential coming from your brain's activity.
Right.
And that's a pretty big idea.
Yeah, it really is. As you can actually be more aware of your emotion mind, it gives you the opportunity, I think, to drop down into your wise mind, where you can actually start making different kinds of things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, got it. Yeah, that's a nice way to put it.
And when you use, obviously, all of this is fantastic scientific research, new findings in neuroscience. How do you take that information that you're learning and taking it out to coaching your own clients? Because I know in all of the jobs that you do, Margaret, one of the things you do is you're also a leadership coach. So how do you do that?
Well, probably, I mean, leaders have lots of challenges, but everyone that I know has a pretty darn good size ego, right? Like this is my identity and, I suffer if I don't, if it's not served, if I don't feel valuable. And so I don't know about you, I'm sure you have the same experience. When we're coaching people, their emotions are aroused about something.
Yeah.
And it usually has to do with other people.
Yes.
Right. And it usually means they're not seeing things as they are. They're seeing them through the filter of their emotions. And so I explain, I love doing little tutorials when I know ready and say, like, do you realize what's happening here? Your emotions are basically your ego speaking, not the truth speaking.
Right.
And helping them realize that the other person's not responsible for making them feel that way. Like I've been blamed, I've been disrespected, I've been I'm having a conflict. Really helping people take ownership. That's their own emotional response. Also, there's also a real right way forward.
Yes.
That's blocked, and so helping them find what is the right next step.
Right.
How to clear the noise. Right next step. Now that actually one of the things that has been coming up more recently, and I don't know if it's because of the pandemic, everybody's anxious.
Yes.
Fearful.
Yes.
I've just kind of been noticing when my clients say something like, I'm afraid this is going to happen, or I'm worried this is going to happen, and this is what I want everybody to do. This is the decision I want to make. And I've been noticing in myself, when I'm coming from, when I actually, because I have a team of 30 people as well. And I'm guilty of also saying, I'm worried this is going to happen.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've kind of just realized that when you come from that place, come from fear. I mean, we would not admit we're leaders, that we're not afraid, but darn it, you are. Anxiety is just fear, stress is worry, right? Or it's the same, it's coming from the same general place. So when you're coming from that place, you're not actually seeing what to do next, clearly.
Right.
And you're missing potential. And so you're worried rather than seeing potential, so it's problem focused, not possibility focused. So that is, I think working with leaders, you're helping them sort out what's going on here and what do I do about it and what do I need to learn and how do I need to grow and what do I do that's the right next step. And so I think just helping everybody understand the way their brain works and how to actually take a deep breath and see, okay, this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, what's really going on here?
That's sort of what you're doing all the time.
Yep, absolutely.
You're talking about is what's real,
Mm-hmm.
real right stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What am I missing in my perspective?
Well, one thing you said a little earlier was that, we often have to categorize our emotions because there are just so many of them and they're coming at us from every different direction. But you also said we have to be a bit careful and mindful about hardening those categories. So do you want to talk to me a little bit about that and what the consequences are of hardening those categories, number one? And the second piece would be, so then when those categories are hardened as a coach, how do you help people sort of loosen the edges in those categories?
Loosen ourselves from our moorings. Yeah. So first, can you repeat the first question?
Yeah, just about the hardening of the categories.
But sorry, naming the emotions. Okay, so so Lisa Barrett, actually, she teaches this. This is from the research. There's actually a scientific paper called "Putting Feelings into Words." So emotions are coming up from the lower parts of the brain, with a productive aim, even though it sort of seems like they're just getting in the way and hijacking you. But they come up from the lower part of the brain and then they reach your consciousness.
Yes.
And a productive way to manage them is to give them a label, to name them with some granularity. And that allows you to objectify them and manage them. So it's a first trick for self-regulation is to name. Is it this? Is it that? Is it this with a little of that?
Right.
So, and because they're being constructed in every moment, they're never exactly the same.
Right.
So do you ever have that? I work with right now in my own emotion integration work. I've been really working my dreams because I see that there's a part of me stuck in a dynamic in the dream. And I can often remember that dynamic and I can remember the energy state. And then I'm sitting there thinking, what the heck is that state?
How do I name it?
Like, how do I name it? And it's not that easy, and usually it's a little bit of an effort early in the morning with my coffee, but eventually I'll get, that part of me is in this state. Like, I think this morning was something around losing ground or something like that.
Wow.
I could think of a business situation where that might have come up the day before. And so I was actually so I'm sitting there with that and I'm trying like the Dickens, like, what is this? So that exercise is really worthwhile because when you can understand, because the emotion doesn't come with a label, it just is an energy.
Right.
It's pre-consciousness, right? So then you have to sort of figure out what's your subconscious trying to tell you, right?
Right. Well, I think that's where that can really be helpful is because people say, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry. But when you ask them to break it down, it really can make a difference because what you mean by sad and what I mean by sad and what somebody, across the room means by sad can be incredibly different because they're different stories, different predictions that we've made. So that emotional granularity really is interesting. And it isn't as easy as it seems. I've done it with a few groups and we've tried to break it, gone and tried to come up with words. And I know in some cases, Lisa even says, just make up words, like make up things. speak a different language, but try to get out a label for those little specific pieces.
Right. And because
Very interesting.
it's parts of you talking to you
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
your emotions, and they're, you may not get to them right now, and it may not make sense right now, but it's certainly from your experience through your life. And so it might take you back to an earlier stage.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely, I mean, emotions are socially constructed. So they're constructed by the brain, but in a social context.
Right.
Where, whatever is going on especially in your early family life, a lot of stuff happened then, right?
Yes. Yes.
You don't remember, that you're not conscious of. And when you have kids, you can sort of see, oh yeah, there,
Mhm.
and see where that came from. And so yeah, it's fun. I mean, I have to say now that we're so much more thoughtful and so much less primitive when we think about emotions.
Yes.
There's a lot to unpack.
Absolutely.
Good work. It's really good work.
And the second part of that question was about the hardening of the categories. So although it's great to label things and have a name, because if it's got some kind of, it comes into consensus reality, we can actually deal with it. So that's great. But then what happens when those categories harden?
Right. So the thing is, because the consciousness is emerging all the time, the category emerged at a moment in time based on a certain set of features that you then turned into a category.
Right.
But it's very much dependent on that moment in time and those circumstances. The next moment, so just take a relationship like a marriage or a boss and a direct report.
Yep.
It's been going on for a while. There's a lot of patterns there. And so you start to see people and define them by that past experience and those past coordinates. That doesn't do them justice or you justice, because they're emerging and you're emerging. And as soon as you get tied to some past interpretation, you actually miss the potential in the moment. And the labeling becomes, it can be really damaging to people. I remember in business school, actually in Canada, I went to the Ivy business school. Used to be, what did it used to be called? Western, I can't remember now. It had
Still Western University, but yeah, the Ivy.
So the Ivy school, yeah. And so I remember there was a woman in my group that had a personality that was from another culture, and it didn't fit well. It was hard for her. We didn't really understand inclusion back then.
Right.
And she got labeled early on, and she couldn't. And this is just in a class, and she couldn't break out of that. And we weren't wise enough, and obviously we weren't being taught cultural competence.
No.
We didn't realize that we were part of the labeling. And that when I moved to England from Canada, and then I moved to the US later, it was very helpful for me in terms of letting go of an identity of one place and then changing it to another, because when you move from one country to the other, your past disappears, because nobody knows where you went to school, and they don't have any of the references you have, and you don't have any of theirs. So you start with a clean slate,
right?
And you have to actually figure out, now who am I?
Exactly.
And so we don't get to do that very often in life, right?
No.
So those are the categories, you get stuck in a certain way of seeing yourself and seeing other people and seeing the world, and those are temporary and they don't last long, and you have to let them go.
True. Well, one thing that happens in business quite often is when you are within one company, and if you start out at a fairly low level and people start to get to know you, and they do categorize you. So it takes an awful lot of effort to get to the next level and the next level inside the organization, because you actually have to ensure that other people see your evolution. So oftentimes you will see people moving from, if they want to get into management, they might move from one organization to another, because they get a fresh start, and people get a fresh perspective of who they are.
Exactly. And that's exactly what happens. And company cultures are extremely well. I mean, we always talk about how hard it is to change culture. Cultures get very rigid, and people get rigid, and we're so busy. Like when we're busy and we're stressed, it's worse. Right? Our biases, our categories are even more hardened. And And we don't do ourselves or others a favor when we don't allow emergence.
Yes.
And
Well,
it's
we
that's
don't.
the great thing about coaching, right? Coaching is it's a non-linear process where we're allowing, giving people space where something new can emerge.
Absolutely. And having that time to reflect and talk about these things, because you even said, when the categories of your emotions harden, then when do they ever soften? If you're so busy and there's so much going on and you just kind of go to default places, but coaching does give the time to maybe look at the underlying beliefs and assumptions that people have.
Mhm.
Is that something that can help to loosen those emotions a little bit and maybe even recategorize some of those pieces?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I think about coaching as sort of gently rocking people from their moorings. I mean, the pandemic was like a, seismic.
It,
I mean, I often think about the summer cottage in Canada, and we had a raft that floated.
yes,
And it felt to me like the raft, our rafts are normally anchored, right? There's a
yep,
big thing of cement
yep,
on the in the lake floor that holds the raft there. But it
yeah.
was like someone cut that off and we were all drifting around
All were,
and
yep,
not knowing like who am I and where am I going, and like because there was a while right at the beginning of the pandemic when we really didn't know.
we really didn't know.
And that was hard.
Yeah.
We don't really want to go through that again. Hopefully, we may have to because the world is awfully unpredictable. But
Mhm.
I think in coaching we're shaking people from their moorings
Mm.
in a way that's safe, in a way that just like is sort of like being rocked, but not too much.
Yep.
They'll like just be able to like move a little bit and
Mm.
say, okay, well, maybe I can see the situation differently. Like, you know,
Right.
this is the way I've been seeing it. This
Yep.
is the way I've been framing it. But what if I could see it a little differently? So
Right.
we are doing that. We're just gently shaking up the
Yeah.
mooring.
And shifting their perspectives and hopefully allowing them some comfort to explore some different things, than they were normally accustomed to doing. So
Yeah.
that is the beauty and the value of coaching. And I do think we've just experienced a term I heard was the global life quake. So a life quake is one thing, but this was like a global life quake that
Everybody.
all of us had experienced. And it is just, I think, and I've said this to before on a number of these webcasts, is we've almost been reduced to a two-dimensional model of ourselves. We really aren't seeing the whole person. We just see from shoulders up for the most part. And I think it actually has really um, amplify the need for leaders to be coaches and for coaches to have a very deep understanding of the context that leaders are really leading in right now, because it is so precarious and it is so different and it is completely uncharted territory. As you talk about loosening the moorings, there are no maps for the future right now. So it's quite, I think, how do you actually help people to navigate this complex system and get that unified sense of mind? And I think that's where your real expertise comes in, is because you understand the biology, you understand the psychology, you understand the business aspects, and how do you bring, and even the health and wellness of each of us, how do you bring that all together and really help leaders to be more successful?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think part of what I want to say, and maybe it's because I was born on a dairy farm, which is a very simple place, quiet, simple place in the country with no, not a lot of social stimulation, not, I mean, compared to the stuff that kids do now. So I think I am a simplifier, not a complexifier. And
Right.
so I think that it boils down to one set of elements that underpin leadership, well-being, thriving, whole person thriving, and coaching, and that leadership and well-being and coaching are not different things, because um, everyone wants to have a direction.
Mm,
Humans need to know they're going somewhere. It doesn't have to have a deadline on it, but there has to be a purpose, a direction, right?
mm,
We even see this with folks who like autopsies of a group of people. It turns out people that they find in the autopsy have a lot of plaques, so they've got dementia.
Right.
But they didn't show any signs of cognitive decline. So same amount of dementia in their brains, but when they were alive, they had not been diagnosed. And the difference between the folks who had been diagnosed with dementia and had the plaques, and the people who had the plaques but weren't, was that those folks had a sense of purpose.
Interesting.
So they had a direction. So it can actually drive you through a brain full of plaques. So that's the first thing. So what's leadership? It's about going somewhere. It's about getting people together and going together, right? So that's one place where well-being and leadership go together. The next thing is inspiration and enthusiasm, engagement, right? You can whatever, engagement. We've got this term now. We stopped using, I noticed, the word morale, and now we talk about engagement. Engagement just means like you lean in and you do stuff that you're enthusiastic about and inspired to do, and that also is a big driver in well-being. We know that from positive psychology.
Right.
Having autonomy and empowerment and agency, that's the number one human psychological need that's emerged from self-determination theory. In fact, DC and Ryan would say that autonomy and competence in relationships come before those other things I just talked about, purpose and engagement, that you have to have enough autonomy and empowerment to live your own life and to be the author of your destiny, driving your own car. Actually, we won't be driving our own cars soon. I don't know how I'm going to deal with my autonomy without driving a car. Somehow I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We need autonomy in order to do those other things. So that's leaders are autonomous. They foster autonomy. They foster empowerment. And then competence. Second big need. What's competence? Competence is what you do, obviously, in your family life, but work is where you really cultivate your competence, right? Like I am someone who can do this. And so we're helping people, leaders are helping other people build competence. Isn't that what we do as leaders?
Right.
You're growing competence all day long.
That's right.
Where are we going? How are we going to be able to have the skills and knowledge and habits to get there, right? And then the relationships, work is full of love.
Yes.
Thank goodness for people now talking about love at work. I mean, it's not the kind of love you have for your spouse and your children, but it is a deep, benevolent, genuine caring. So leadership and well-being are the same things. They're not different.
Right.
And it's not like you park your well-being, here and your leadership elsewhere. No, when you're leading, you are leaning in to ignite the major domains of human well-being.
Absolutely.
And work is an expression of human competence that makes us well. And so again, it's one system. It's we're one being.
Right.
It happens to be a leader or a parent or a student or whatever role we're playing. So that's what I think, the future of all of this is one system.
Right.
And that it's all one. And as leaders, we're responsible for engagement and well-being and
Well, it's the integration, I think, is what you've talked about, is the integration of all those parts. So there are many, many parts, but you like to simplify those and make sure there's integration and the separation is not always, maybe temporarily it's useful, but for the most part, it's not useful. Yes. And one thing Margaret, my dad, used to always say is, you've got to love yourself before you can love other people. And so I think that applies, as a leader, you've got to take care of yourself before you really can lead and take care of other people. And, your whole focus, coming up through the biotech and the healthcare system and working with well coaches and being one of those people that wrote the textbook, many years ago around leaders or coaches from a wellness perspective. So what do you think leaders need to do today to really take care of themselves?
Right, the self-care.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we've all been, and they have all been reflecting on this in the pandemic, because
Yes.
unless you've been on the front lines, which a lot of people have,
Yeah.
you've been at home with yourself, with your
Yes.
family.
Yeah.
Well, human thriving is a personal thing. And it's a formula.
Yeah.
Just like a flower has a formula for thriving,
Right.
humans a bit more complicated, and it is in your wiring, your personality structure. And so for one person, an adventure is one thing, for another person, it's a different thing.
Right.
Some people need more stability, some people need more disruption and chaos. Some
Right.
people
Right.
need
True.
more, we're all very different. And so the first thing is, which I think kind of comes from authentic leadership, is to really understand you, and not like the Chinese philosophers would be critical of us here today, because it's not about finding yourself,
Right.
because
Right.
we're
Evolving.
constantly being transformed. It's
Yes.
actually about putting yourself into new situations and discovering new things about yourself. And I think that's a much more interesting way. So you're emerging as a human being, and you're doing it in a way that is fun and exciting and interesting. So you want to, I'd say, not just love yourself in terms of care and take care, but also being yourself and being the interesting, wacky person you are, as unbalanced as you are in your personality type, or balanced. I see people who have
Right.
real balance in their personalities, and some people who are completely imbalanced, and it's just the structure. It's not anything you have control over. So so I think there's just being able to be with that, and being curious about it, and enjoying it, and then taking good care of yourself. There's body intelligence too. It's not just emotional intelligence. What does your
Yes.
body need
Yeah.
in this moment, in this day, in this week, in this month, in this life, to feel good?
Yeah.
Because your brain has no energy store, so it's only getting what you put in your bloodstream.
Yep.
So whatever you ate last
Yeah.
or last night is all it's got.
So you really are what you eat.
You're not going to have a high functioning brain.
Right.
And
Right.
so that and that affects your mood, and
Yeah.
that affects your ability to regulate your emotions. And so
Mm.
yeah, I think the deeper you get, I had a conversation with an executive in the financial industry
Mm.
uh, just before the financial crisis in 2008 or so. I wanted to create a business of executive coaching around well-being, which I was about 10 years ahead of my time at that point. But and I remember an executive saying to me, "Look, we burn up our well-being. We have life insurance. There's nothing left at the end. We're not going to invest in our well-being. It's just not the game we're in. That's the financial industry. It's in our lifetimes." That
Wow.
was the attitude. We don't we make a lot of money. Our families are taken care of. We live, um, we drink and eat and travel. We
Yeah.
burn up our physical health. That's
Wow.
what we do. And he was just honest. He said, I don't know anybody that's not doing that.
Oh my.
And that's a while ago.
Yeah.
But I think
That long.
but I think people today, you stop flying around on airplanes, and you start to sleep better, and then you realize, my gosh, if I stay home, I actually, I'm healthier. A lot of us are healthier
I
than we
think so.
were, because we're not rushing around. And so then, do you really want to give that up? And you're a little. So I think understanding your own well-being, and I don't mean just your physical well-being, but like what makes you really come alive, what inspires you, what gives you energy, what makes you excited for the day ahead. We got to invest in that as leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. And Lisa Feldman Barrett talks about the body budget. You know how she talks, that's kind of what you were just describing, is that, the brain really just tries to keep you alive, but, the body is really the part that actually provides the budget that brain has to use. And so it's quite interesting as to what you were just describing now.
I know, because people want like some big secret, like, how do I keep myself energized? Well, sorry, sleep.
Yeah. All the basics.
Have fun, eat
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Well, and how do you think coaching, like the actual act of coaching, supports leaders to do that? Can you think of some example or something that you've done where you really been able to get people to get their heads around that so that they can be as effective as they
Yeah, I
can.
mean, I have simplified my model, and I'm doing some groups now. I'm actually doing 2 groups of 10 to 12 Black and Asian police leaders
Oh,
that I'm
interesting.
just starting, and that'll mean I've got 4 groups going, which is a lot. You know, that's
Yes,
altogether that's 36 people,
right.
and so it's a way to reach a lot more people. And I still do one-on-ones with them, but clearly not like you would do.
Of
And
course.
so I've set it up so they've got peers, dyads, and so it's,
Nice.
you know, it's a way. And so I've simplified it because I want them to coach each other into 3 things,
Okay.
really just 3 things. I mean, there's complexity around each one. One is, you know, everything to do with vision, motivation, drive, like where are you going?
Right.
What's, you know, who do you want to become? You know,
Yeah.
all those kinds of questions. What kind of leader do
What's
you want to
your
be?
intention?
You know, what is it? And whether it's right this minute or whether it's 5 years from now. And, you know, 2 of these groups are very focused on promotions and like they want to get to the next level. And so they need to play that game, but they also have to be authentically themselves. So
Right.
that the second is the resources. So positive
Mhm.
psychological capital, strengths,
Yeah.
positive experiences, all the, you know, the strength that we've, you know, how we turn the trauma of the pandemic into growth, you know, what's come out of that.
Right.
So
Right.
what's the capital that we're standing on? And it's real capital,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Psychological capital, it's financial capital, it's everything, but it's the
Yes.
capital. And then the third is really borrowing from the Stoics, which is the obstacle is the way.
Right.
Where am I suffering most? What's my biggest strain, my biggest stress? That's
Yes.
the growth edge.
Yes.
And the growth edge is populated by your aroused emotions.
Mhm.
Right? They're right there. You don't have to look
There.
for a growth edge.
No, not
What's
during
the
that.
thing that comes to the surface?
Yeah.
And then how do you get people to transcend that?
Yes.
So there's a model in mindfulness called SART, self-awareness, self-regulation, self-transcendence.
Right.
So the transcending part, you know, that's the aha moment in coaching. That's the intuitive dance. That's the generative piece. That's like, how do I get someone from, I'm stuck here. I can't deal with this person. I'm feeling controlled. I'm
Mhm.
feeling out of control. You know, whatever, you know, that's not the words they use, but it's, you know, I feel helpless, hopeless, you know, it all comes down to some kind of existential thing, right? And then how do I realize that on the other side of that is the wisdom, the insight, the other
Yes.
perspective, and how do I get there as fast as I can?
Yeah.
And so it's a fairly direct
Mm.
process,
Yeah.
but if you just set the compass,
Yeah.
keep your eye on your strengths, ground yourself in them, and then just keep stepping up to what's my challenge, what I'm feeling,
Absolutely.
what I'm getting past it. And so that's sort of like that's how I coach myself too. And I,
Sure.
and I know when I need to go find a coach is when I have a growth edge. I can't get past myself.
Sure.
You know, I'm struggling with something. So
Yeah.
that's it.
Wow.
The
Well,
con-
Stephen Gilligan, he actually just wrote a book called Generative Coaching. And he says something similar to what you're saying about the obstacle. He said he attaches it to the martial art of Aikido. So, when that obstacle comes up, I think this is sort of what you were saying. The obstacle comes up, rather than blocking it, you go with the energy because that obstacle has energy. So you
yeah,
go with the energy to
yeah,
transform it into what are the resources
yeah,
as possible and welcome those edges and welcome those obstacles.
exactly it. That's
And
exactly
yeah, that does create a generative place for you to start taking action.
yeah.
Instead, we've tended to view challenges or even view the whole world as like a risk analysis, a gap analysis. How are we going to defeat all these things? When really, if we just welcome them and embrace them, amazing
They
things.
carry us forward. Yeah, it's counter to appreciative inquiry, which is focused on
Yeah,
building on strengths and
right.
making those more and unpacking the conditions that allow you to be at your best and then making that more consistent.
Sure.
So it's a little different from that. And I find if people, the way I think about that is if you've got a lot of resources and confidence already,
Yeah,
then you're not afraid to step into the obstacles. You
right.
don't just make the best more that you can
Right.
actually set your goal on something else. But I think what's important is that for leaders, you can only go so far as the amount of strain you can handle.
Exactly.
Right? You can only grow in terms of the demands on you that are put on you by the organization or whatever you choose to take on as your responsibility and your mission. You can only grow as fast as you can handle the strain.
Yep.
And so if you turn the strain into strength, you just will lift, you'll be able to stay in an upward spiral as a leader. Because you know about Keegan's point, if the stress is just the sign that you're in over your head. The demand on the moment is greater than your ability.
Right.
So if you can if you can actually grow into the demand not being strained, then you can take on more. And so if you're built for that, you want to take on more.
Yes.
I mean, everybody makes a decision whether they want to or not. And they can also have strains in other parts of their lives, which means then they can't take on more. Right. But that's what happens. And if you know you're going to take on more demands, you're going to have a shadow, right? The leadership shadow follows the demands because you have further to fall. You're going to be more anxious about things that you never had to worry about before because they weren't on your plate.
Right.
And so the idea of stepping in, the generative stepping into the energy, even if you're kind of like almost like going through the sound barrier, like you're shaking.
Yeah.
Like you have days when you think, "Hi, gosh, shaking. Like this is hard." But if you know that's where it's going, then and I do think that's what leadership is. It's just growing yourself so you can handle more.
Absolutely. And then what about the leader as coach? So sort of our final topic here is really, so for leaders, most of their job, as you described to me earlier, is coaching. Like that really is getting people to add value, gaining confidence to get the job done, helping people to move in the right direction. So what do you think about that leader as coach?
So the way I describe the shift from expert to coach, I think this is the simplest way I can explain it. So come back to self-determination theory, which has 3 primary needs of humans.
Right.
If not met, put you into languishing.
Right.
And, on the 0 to -10.
Yeah. Crash side.
And so we need those needs to be met when we're leaders.
Yes.
So think about autonomy, supporting other people, and competence. So what happens when we're serving ourselves as the expert or the authoritative leader or the leader that's in a hierarchical situation is that our autonomy, which means I know where I want to go and I'm tuned into my own values, I then judge you by that. So now I'm judging you.
Right.
Okay. Instead of supporting your autonomy.
Right.
Then I'm competent. And so then I fix things. I give you the answer, right?
Right.
And then in relationships, I rescue you because I want to be the good guy and I want to help you, right? So the flip you make from serving your own needs as a leader, the expert, judging, fixing, rescuing, I find every leader ends up doing one of those more than the other.
Okay.
So you have your own, wherever your biggest ego need is, where you probably are doing more of this. And then the opposite is to serve the other person's autonomy by asking them what they want and helping them figure it out themselves and helping them build more confidence. Now, the interesting thing about DC and Ryan, because they wrote a chapter in a coaching textbook on self-determination theory and coaching, what I really liked about how they described giving advice is that they basically said a coach has a responsibility to offer information, wisdom, learning in service of the other person's competence because that's their need.
Yes.
And if it's done in a way that does not take away their autonomy and doesn't deprive people of agency, fine.
Right.
It's actually called for.
Right.
So you're serving the other's competence. So that doesn't mean you hide what you know they need. If you happen to, the danger about giving advice is that we just get it wrong most of the time.
Right.
And then people are, you don't really get me.
No.
Tell you, and then they resent you or they resist you. So I think that's the shift. You shift from serving your own needs, which you're not even aware of, to serving others' needs. And so I think that the leader coach polarity balance is more about just more consciousness around
Yes.
who am I serving in this moment.
And gaining those skills to actually
Yeah.
listen, to
Yeah.
actually, have that type of inquiry that they're, able to pull from people what they're trying to do, and having patience, I guess, and persistence. Some of those kinds of things I think are very important. And we're seeing a huge change. Leaders are actually, or I think one of the competencies that's lacking in leadership is coaching. And one of the greatest needs that we're finding is people want to be coached. And I think I've quoted this a number of times, but there was a study done by Bernstein Associates that said leaders who coach are 130% more effective at getting business results than their non-coaching counterparts. Now that unfortunately is a little old data. So if you know of any new data, I would love to hear about it. But they were saying that's how, and that was, I think they did 50,000 surveys. Like it was a huge study that they did. And I think what's interesting is that those people, it wasn't just that the people were happy working for them, they actually were performing and producing results so much better than their non-coaching.
Yeah, because they were, so one of the human needs, again, it's secondary to autonomy and competence and relatedness, is growth. So
Right.
if things are yucky, and everybody has days that are yucky, life is not, I mean, it's a lot easier than it was 100 years ago,
Sure.
or even 30 years ago, but it's still, it's messy.
Yes.
And it's crowded and it's polluted. I mean, we have a lot of big problems today that we didn't have, it's tough to watch the world, and the human race right now. And I think basically the opportunity is to serve people's desire for growth, because when it's yucky, at least if they think they're getting better,
Right.
and getting stronger, and they're getting more competent, and they're growing themselves, you can put up with the tough world.
Right.
You can handle it if you know you're getting better.
Yes.
It's when you're not getting better and the problems just, you're complaining about the same things in your own mind as you did 3 years ago or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
That's the definition of, that brings you despair, right? It's not getting better. We want to be in the present moment, but the truth is humans need to feel optimistic about the future.
That's true.
Actually, we live with the future, even though we try to pretend we're in the present moment. Our well-being, that's why when there's bad things happening, when optimism goes down, addiction goes up. Because if
Yes.
you don't feel good about the future, it's hard to put up with the difficult today. Because today is just today, and it's gone fast. And so I think that the real deal is that people want to grow, and they don't want to be stuck, and even if that means they need to move on, and you're, as the leader, really dependent on them in that role. It's a hard thing, right, to lose somebody that is, but the truth is that people want to grow, and it's a real need. And when you serve that as a leader, then they're thriving again, right?
Absolutely.
They're thriving even when things are, when they feel, it's how you don't feel trapped in a situation that's bad. So yeah, it's a very important skill. And like when I started Well Coaches, the school of coaching, I was planning to be the business leader. I was not planning on being a coach.
Okay.
And I did not know that I had coaching ability.
Okay.
I did not know.
Wow.
I mean, I knew that I really loved helping people develop.
Right.
I knew that I got a lot of pleasure out of that, and I wanted to be in the coaching field. So I knew that. I knew that I got as much pleasure from helping people grow as I did from the business results. I was aware of that. But I still was a bossy CEO.
Well, it's funny. So many people that I coach, when I ask them, what is your favorite part of your job, or what is the part that gives you the most pleasure? Almost, 9 times out of 10, it is actually developing other people, watching other people grow, helping people along. And in one organization, they do a lot of mentor coaching inside the company. So the person's not directly in their department. They're in a different department, but they mentor coach. And they said when they do this, they get as much out of it as the coachee, because they really are. They said, oh, that person called me because they had a chance to get an interview and they wanted me to talk with them through it. And you think, well, you're like a senior vice president and you're so excited about that, but it's because they really added value to that person's life. And it gave them great pleasure. And I wonder if all our leaders had those skills and could actually do that. I don't think the business result we'd even have to pay as much attention to, because I think
Well,
it
it's
just
exactly, it doesn't even
emerge.
matter if there's ROI or not. It's just the right thing to do because you're
Yeah.
more impactful. You feel, yeah, I mean, I'm in the healthcare space a lot of my days, and
Mhm.
in fact, I just said in another interview recently, there's one thing I could do. If I could wave my magic wand, I'd have every doctor, nurse, clinician go through a 4-day coach training,
Wow.
because if they could do that, they would start to focus on their own self-care.
Mm.
They would change the conversation with their peers, their teams, their bosses, their patients, their families, that would be more impactful, which would make them feel as though they're more impactful.
Wow.
One of the easiest things they can do. So from my standpoint, it's not even really, we don't really need to prove
Right.
that there's an ROI. It's the life satisfaction,
Mhm.
and from the being able to help someone in a profound way is, it's hard to beat that, right? You're a coach. It's pretty hard to beat that in life.
It really is. Well, thank you so much, Margaret, for this wonderful interview and the insights. Do you have any final, like, maybe couple words of wisdom to send us off with?
Well, I know, Sue, you're, as I am, dedicated to teaching people how to coach, right? I think we are very much aligned around that, and we do it because we see the transformation of the people that we're teaching in front of our eyes in a very short order, right? So it's very impactful to take, and it's a big process, right? To take someone that doesn't know how to do this and teach them how to do it, and watch them do it
Mhm.
shortest and most efficient and effective amount of time. And I just want to, I know that many of your listeners are wondering, like, do I bother? I'm busy. I'm really busy. Do I bother to learn these skills? And I just think we can both say, as people who do this, who have integrated training others into our work life, that it is one of the biggest gifts you can give yourself. It will pay off in every part of your life. It will make you a better human, just like it's made us better humans.
I agree. Well, thank you so much. And I hope that you can wave that magic wand and get coaching for all of your healthcare practitioners, because I think they all absolutely need to learn those skills so they can feel better, because it has been very difficult couple years for all of them. So thanks, Margaret.
Thanks, Sue.